For more chilling crime content, subscribe. November 2nd, 2020, Lincoln County, Missouri. A small, quiet community of just under 60,000 people, where the biggest headline that fall had been an early frost killing off the pumpkin crop. No one, absolutely no one, expected what would come next. The victim, Darren Kingsley, 38, a father of two, volunteer youth football coach, IT technician at a small data center in St. Charles. To everyone who knew him, Darren was steady, kind, reliable, a man who grilled every Saturday, made dad jokes at inappropriate times, and had never once raised his voice in anger. He wasn't the kind of guy who'd get involved in something dangerous. His wife, Mira Kingsley, later told detectives. He just wasn't. Darren left for work at 7:18 a.m. on November 2nd. Dash cam footage from a neighbor's security camera shows his gray Honda Civic pulling out of the driveway. Normal, uneventful. He stopped for coffee at the usual gas station, spoke briefly with a cashier named Lisa. He seemed fine, but Darren never made it to work. At 8:47 a.m., his phone pinged off a tower 12 miles off his normal route. No explanation. By 10:03 a.m., Mira Kingsley had already called his workplace and discovered he'd never arrived. At 11:12 a.m., her phone rang, but it wasn't Darren. It was 911. 911 dispatcher. Mrs. Kingsley, I'm sorry. We received an emergency call from your husband's phone. He's been found unconscious in a field near Old Mill Road. EMS is en route. Darren had been shot once in the chest, execution style. His phone still gripped in his hand, blood on his lips. He was still alive, barely, and what he managed to say before passing out left police baffled. They knew my name, my kids' names. They said I already reported it, that I made it happen. What did Darren mean? Deputies found something unusual in Darren's wallet, a business card with a handwritten number on the back. The name printed was Elias Morrow, security consultant. There was no known Elias Morrow in any Missouri registry. No LLC, no online presence. Even stranger, the card stock was cheap, not the kind used by professionals. Detectives described it as the kind you'd print from a library computer. Hours into surgery, Darren slipped into a coma. Police now had a victim with a cryptic last message, a mysterious name, and a crime scene with no shell casings, no tire tracks, and no witnesses, despite being less than a mile from a highway. 3 days later, Mira Kingsley showed up at the Lincoln County Sheriff's Office, shaking. She hadn't slept. She hadn't told anyone what she found on Darren's laptop the night he was shot. A folder, password protected, hidden inside another folder labeled Invoices _2018. Inside were screenshots, what appear to be encrypted messages between Darren and someone calling themselves Oracle. The messages were chilling, obsessive, paranoid, some dated back months. Oracle, they're watching again. You need to clean the logs. Darren, I did, but I saw something. Something I wasn't supposed to. Oracle, then you know what comes next. Prepare your family. Who was Oracle, and what had Darren seen? Investigators discovered Darren had recently been fired from a side job he'd kept secret. Remote tech support for a contractor affiliated with the Department of Energy. Mira didn't know about it. His friends didn't either. It paid well, but something had gone wrong. FBI agent Julia Rehnquist, who joined the case as a federal consultant, said, "We believe Mr. Kingsley may have accessed data above his clearance, possibly related to infrastructure simulations. Translation? Darren may have stumbled across national security level data." And the rabbit hole got deeper. A flash drive was found taped behind a drawer in Darren's home office. Encrypted, once cracked by digital forensics, it contained maps, blackout simulations, and an unsigned letter. If you're reading this, I'm probably dead. They made me do it. I didn't know who they were until it was too late. If anything happens to my family, tell them I tried. By now, the case had gone beyond local law enforcement. A federal task force quietly took control of the evidence. But a week later, an anonymous package arrived at the Lincoln County Courthouse. Inside, a burner phone. It contained a single video. Time-stamped October 30th, 2020, 2 days before Darren's shooting. It shows Darren, sitting in a dim motel room, shaking, crying, whispering into the camera. They made me do something I didn't understand. I gave them access. Then they told me I couldn't leave. If anything happens to me, tell Mira I'm sorry. Tell my kids I love them. I didn't want to be a part of this. But I think I just helped them kill people. On November 11th, 2020, Darren Kingsley died in the hospital. His official cause of death: cardiac arrest due to internal bleeding. But the real cause? That remains locked behind government silence, redacted reports, and a trail that keeps going colder. No one has claimed responsibility. The Oracle has never been identified. The burner phone was wiped remotely days after it was submitted into evidence. And in the weeks after Darren's death, 2 more contractors connected to the same DOE subcontractor died under suspicious circumstances. One in Maryland, the other in Nevada. But what exactly did Darren Kingsley uncover? And what had he helped them do? He called 911 to report his own murder. And as the evidence mounts, it's becoming terrifyingly clear he might have been right. The funeral was closed casket. Mira didn't want the kids to remember their father like that, sunken, pale, tube still in his neck. Instead, she printed out a picture of Darren holding their youngest on his shoulders at the county fair, blue ribbon in one hand, corn dog in the other. The kind of moment he never thought would be the last. 3 days after Darren was buried, the family dog began barking at the back fence. Mira checked the cameras. Nothing. But in the morning, she found manila envelope on the doorstep. No address. No return. Inside, 25 pages of what looked like surveillance logs. Times, locations, even grocery store purchases. Hers. The last page had one line written in red pen. "They're watching you now." She drove to the sheriff's office in her slippers. Detective Shane Herrick reviewed the log silently, then picked up the phone. Within the hour, the sheriff's department was told, firmly, to stand down. A federal agent from St. Louis, Julia Rehnquist, took possession of the envelope and everything Mira had turned over, and no one could explain what jurisdiction she was actually operating under. The case, as far as the county was concerned, was over. But Mira didn't stop. She went through Darren's journals, his work files, old texts, notebooks, even receipts. On the back of one Home Depot receipt was a scribbled password: FTX access _893 #safe. She tried it on Darren's personal laptop. It opened a hidden partition, one that had been set to delete itself after 5 failed login attempts. Inside were audio recordings, 6 of them, labeled only by dates. The earliest was from July 12th. They came to me after I flagged the intrusion, said it wasn't my place, said it wasn't even real. But it was real. I saw where the signal originated, Tehran, but bounced off a server in Delaware. They said if I told anyone, my wife would get a call in the middle of the night. I think they meant it. The July 29th recording was worse. They gave me a folder. It was encrypted, labeled Scenario Gamma Echo. I decrypted it. It was a map of St. Louis. But there weren't any streets, only grids, blacked out zones, and circles labeled critical load nodes. I don't know what I'm looking at. I don't know what this is for, but it's not right. Mira copied the recordings onto a flash drive and mailed them to 2 people, Darren's former boss at the Department of Energy and her own brother, a tech reporter in Dallas. 3 days later, her brother's apartment was broken into. Nothing stolen, just his computer tower left in pieces. He didn't call the police. He called Mira. That night, Mira took the kids and fled the house. But she wasn't the only one watching. At 3:19 a.m., surveillance footage from a neighbor's Nest camera captured a figure standing outside Myra's bedroom window. Male, wearing a hoodie, holding something in his hand. He wasn't trying to break in. He was just watching. A week later, Agent Rehnquist returned. She told Mira to stop, told her to let Darren rest, told her there were layers here that don't involve you. Mira asked what Scenario Gamma Echo was. Agent Rehnquist's jaw tightened. She didn't answer. The same night, Mira received an email. No subject line. No sender info. Just a file attachment titled echo_trace.mp4. She clicked it. It was footage of Darren, months before his death, sitting in a conference room, speaking to 3 men in suits. No audio, just video. But as Darren handed him a folder, one of the men leaned forward and said something that made Darren freeze. Frame by frame, you could see the color drain from his face. Mira paused it there, took a screenshot, zoomed in. One of the men had a ring, a military seal, Department of Defense, and she recognized him. He was one of the men who attended Darren's funeral. The ring was no coincidence. Mira replayed the funeral in her mind, over and over. There were maybe 40 people. Most were family, neighbors, or people from Darren's work. But now she remembered the man clearly. Tall, late 50s, clean-shaven, black suit that didn't quite match the small-town feel. No one spoke to him. No one introduced him. He had left immediately after the service, stepping into a black Lincoln with federal plates. She sent the photo to her brother. He ran it through a source and got a match. Colonel Simon Devereux, former cybersecurity liaison for the Department of Defense. Retired, allegedly, in 2017. No known connection to the Department of Energy, except he was the man in the video with Darren. Mira forwarded the image to Agent Rehnquist. 2 hours later, her email stopped working. 3 hours later, her phone started ringing from unknown numbers. One voicemail came through, garbled and distant, with a voice that whispered, "You were warned. Don't make this your burden." By the next day, she had packed up the kids again and driven to a motel off Route 61. But something was waiting for her there. A package. No name. No postage. Just sitting in front of her room door. Inside, a printed map. On it were 3 red XS, each marking locations in Missouri, all within 30 miles of each other. At the bottom, one sentence. They ran the test already. Mira called her brother in a panic. He didn't answer. Instead, his wife picked up, crying. He was gone, vanished, left the house at 6:20 a.m. to meet a source. Never came back. His car was found later, that night, in a shopping plaza in Arlington. Doors locked, wallet still inside. No blood, no prints, just gone. Back in Missouri, Mira opened Darren's old work phone, trying one last time to break into it. On a whim, she entered a password from the Home Depot receipt. FTX access _893 #safe. It worked. Inside was only one thing, a document titled Stage 2 Activation Protocol. It read like military jargon, references to operational blackout corridors, data suppression thresholds, and grid test thresholds. But one thing stood out. Stage 2 to be executed under live conditions within a civilian environment no later than Q4 2020, under plausible deniability protocol. Beneath that was a table, time zones, durations, and power grid nodes. One of them was marked in bold, Lincoln County Substation C, the same grid that had a technical failure the night Darren was found bleeding in the field. Mira printed it out, drove to the sheriff's office, demanded to speak with someone in charge. But the moment she showed the document, the deputy's face changed. He stepped into the back and never came back out. Instead, 2 men in gray suits appeared. Not uniforms. No badges. No names. They told her to come with them. She refused and ran. She didn't go back to the motel. She didn't even go back for her things. Instead, she drove straight to a name Darren had circled in his old notebooks. A man he'd mentioned only once in a message to Oracle. Dr. Evan Del Rey, an electrical engineer, formerly of Sandia Labs, disappeared from public view in 2015. She found him, living in a cabin in Montana under a different name. And when he opened the door and saw the folder in her hands, he didn't speak. He just opened the door wider and said, "You weren't supposed to find me, but if you did, it means the protocol's already begun." The man who opened the door was older than his photographs. Deep lines etched his face, eyes sharp and twitchy, a shotgun resting just behind the doorway. Mira stepped inside carefully, clutching the folder like it might catch fire. For a long time, neither of them spoke. Finally, he broke the silence. "Where did you get that document?" My husband, Mira said. Darren Kingsley. He died because of whatever this is. Dr. Evan Delray closed the cabin door, double-locked it, then yanked the curtains shut. He moved like someone who hadn't trusted daylight in years. Then, slowly, he lit a cigarette with shaking hands and sat down across from her. I warned him this would happen. Delray had once been one of the lead engineers for a classified project under the Department of Energy and DARPA. Its purpose: to simulate targeted blackouts in the event of cyber warfare, to test resilience, response time, and population behavior. But somewhere along the line, the simulations went live. They called it Phoenix Echo. We were told it was never going to be operational. Just code, just theory. But then they started feeding it real grid data, mapping hospitals, substations, comms towers. Then they started asking how to suppress certain reporting layers. That's when I walked. Mira opened the document Darren had left behind. Delray's face drained as he scanned it. This is version 7. I only ever saw version 3. He pointed to a highlighted line near the bottom. Civilian data engineers may be used to test vulnerability without disclosure, to preserve behavioral authenticity. That's how they got Darren, he said. They made him the mouse in their own maze. Mira pulled out the screenshot, the still frame from the video of Darren handing the folder to Colonel Simon Devereux. Delray stared at it for a long time. That man doesn't work for the DOE. He was NSA once, before disappearing off-grid. If he's involved, it means this program wasn't about defense anymore. It was about stress testing society, how far it could bend before breaking. Suddenly, the cabin lights flickered. Delray froze. Mira turned to the window. Completely dark outside, but the low hum of a vehicle engine began to rise in the distance. Headlights swept across the tree lane. You led them here. They didn't have time to argue. Delray grabbed a metal briefcase. Mira snatched the folder, and they pushed out the back of the cabin into the woods. A minute later, a black SUV rolled into the clearing. 2 men stepped out. No uniforms. No words. They went inside with purpose. Less than 10 seconds later, the cabin exploded. Mira and Delray huddled under brush nearly a mile away, watching the flames. They just killed 2 of their own, Mira whispered. Delray shook his head. No, that wasn't meant for them. That was meant for me. The next day, Mira and Delray crossed into Wyoming, using back roads and burner phones. From a dusty truck stop payphone, they dialed a number Mira had never seen before. One Darren had scribbled on a napkin inside a copy of the Martian Chronicles. It was written below one word: fail-safe. A man answered. His voice was clear, calm, practiced. I assume you're calling because Darren's dead. Who is this? Someone who tried to stop this 5 years ago. Someone who lost a daughter to one of their tests. Your oracle. Silence. You want the truth? You'll need access to a terminal inside a place called Raven Rock. Mira had heard the name once before, in one of Darren's voicemails, barely audible. If anything happens to me, look for Raven Rock. It's where they test the system on themselves. Delray's hands trembled. That's a military continuity bunker, he said. If Oracle's right, that means this wasn't just about Darren. This was a nationwide failover experiment. Myra's phone buzzed. No number. One message. We warned you. Stop digging. But just below that, an attached video. From inside a room filled with monitors and cables. A server room. In the reflection of the glass. Darren, standing behind a rack. Alive.